All right, welcome. We are live, and I do apologize for the slight delay in our arrival, but we are here, we are back, and we are ready to do this as we await the great Erik Houdini to join us. I am Ethan Norof. I am stoked to be back with you guys, and I know that it has been a wild and wacky week in fantasy basketball. I know that it has been a kind of a wild and crazy start to the season. Warriors looking very unwarrior like, for example, to say the least. But in addition to that, obviously, Lakers remain winless going into this evening's affair. Now that we have Erik on the line, we're going to get Erik to join us in. We're going to add in Erik right now. Erik, good morning, buddy. So great to see you. So glad that you're here. Just so curious as we're donning, just in case there's any confusion, we are donning an NFL background today. I think in honor of the NFL season, but we are very much here to talk about fantasy basketball. Erik, I was just mentioning briefly how unwarriors like the Warriors have looked, and I think this is an okay place for us to start, if you don't mind, because I have this question myself. James Wiseman, man, I think a lot of people drafted him expecting him to finally be something now that he's been on the court. And it's been about as smooth as sandpaper. So, Erik, are you considering dropping Wiseman? Is this something we're already ready to end this experiment in fantasy basketball 2 weeks into the year?
Uh, if okay, first of all, I'm in a lot of leagues that don't have IL slots, unfortunately, and specifically in those kinds of leagues. And I know a lot of our viewers like to, as we call it in my league, play hardcore and not have any slots for injured guys or guys who, um, you know, have the luxury of benching guys in weekly roster changes formats. No, he's just not producing enough. So I wouldn't really hang on to him. Yeah, I definitely drop Wiseman as far as he goes right now. At best, I consider him a streamer. On weeks where I figure some of the Warriors are going to be resting their usual guys. I know Clay rested tonight, but even that opportunity was not enough for Wiseman. I think that we might really have to wait a while. It might not even happen this season. I still believe in the kid. I think he's got a great future ahead of him, but that future is not necessarily coming this season.
It's so interesting because I think Steve Kerr's been getting some questions on it recently to say, hey, what's going on in terms of your rotation, right? Wiseman's kind of a fringe player right now. Jonathan Kuminga, who I think a lot of people again expected to play sort of not just a role but a very real role for this team this year, has not played that for this team and then some. So it's a lot of questions about exactly what's going on with the Warriors, especially as they take another loss. Steph Curry tweaked his neck tonight as well. We'll see what that means, but it's just
Well, he
sort of
came
a
back though. He came
weird
back
vibe to
for
start the year
what
for
it's
Golden
worth. Yeah,
State, right?
yeah. So I think that the Warriors are still in that post championship hangover, and they haven't had their new season coffee, so to speak.
Sure.
And I think I read it somewhere that their current defense to start the season is somewhere at the bottom of the league in terms of points allowed. So the Warriors, who are normally a respectable defensive team,
Hmm.
are kind of lazy. Let's call it what it is. The guys
Yeah.
are lazy. They just they just got their rings, and they're not hungry. They're not hungry like the Celtics are. They're not hungry like the Bucks are. So
So
there.
I think there's a little bit of that malaise for sure. I think what you're saying is kind of spot on in terms of what to expect from this team right now. I mean, they've even in their trash talk, right? They're you saw Klay Thompson holding up the four against Devin Booker, like, yeah, man, all right, come talk to me later about this because I got four of these already. So I agree with you in that perspective, and we'll just I think it's safe to say the Warriors will be fine, but I am interested to see how, in particular, the Wiseman thing develops because this is a franchise that really prides itself on drafting and developing well, and this is how they want to sustain the next era of Warriors basketball. So we'll see how it shakes out for Golden State. All right, as the Warriors move on, and as every other team in the NBA moves on, I'm just going to get it out of the way right now, Eric. I am without words for the Lakers. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Obviously, I do our Ethos Lakers podcast as well with JC and you know Russell Westbrook, of course, but it is so much more than just Russell Westbrook, and I'm really just it's a sad state of affair for the Lakers. So I just wanted to pour one out metaphorically for the team real quick as we prepare to move on. Uh, Biggest topic for me right now is what's going on with the Clippers. We talked about Kawhi Leonard last week, you and I.
Ooh,
And
how's that feeling?
it's feeling real bad right about now for me. So, how concerned are you about the Kawhi Leonard? What we'll call it an injury, I guess, or the Kawhi Leonard injury concern?
Well, it's an injury. I mean,
Yeah,
it's part
right.
of the recovery from an injury. So let's
Okay.
call it that.
Okay.
Um,
So let's call it
so
injury. How?
so far, I didn't I I didn't step on your game last week. I know you rolled the dice on Kawhi and you preface prefaced that that draft pick on his per game upside. So I didn't want to rain on that parade, but everyone else who's ever asked me advice relating to Kawhi Leonard, my generic go to is stay away, because even if he does surpass whatever ADP or whatever trade value that you gave up for him, um, I guess I'm kind of risk averse, uh, and he is one of the bigger. Uh, he's probably the biggest. Okay, let's call it that. He's the biggest risk reward pick, out of the draft, in fantasy that we went through, um, because of the heights that he's been able to deliver. Um, but the missed games, oh, it's just I thought it's just going to be back to backs, but it's more than one side of back to backs. It's okay, he's not ready. So if he's not ready and he's missing this many games, above and beyond half of a back to back, then I'm really concerned, because this is just part of the injury management process. He hasn't tweaked a this or that while compensating for his bad knee, which tends to be the problem with guys coming back from these kinds of injuries. So I'd be concerned. In your case, since you drafted him so early, uh, I guess the advice I'd share with anyone in a similar situation as you is, yeah, he'll come back. He'll post probably a good game at some point, and then I'd look to move him then, right, and get what I can. But selling him now is, I mean, nobody wants him. No one will give you a bag of Cheetos for Kawhi Leonard right now, right? So just sit tight, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you this much: a bag of Cheetos is going for a lot more these days than what it used to go for. But that said, I agree with you. As much as I do like Cheetos, it ain't in the cards for Kawhi right now. It's been a big concern of mine. Obviously, I look at the guys he was drafted over in not only the league where I have him, but in my other leagues as well, and go, wow, and just sort of shake my head. But at the end of the day, it was a gamble, and it will continue to be a gamble until we see exactly how it shakes out. So, yeah, I am very concerned about Kawhi. But we're a waiver wire show, Eric. So, in the wake of Kawhi's absence, is there anyone on the Clippers that you look at and go, well, this player or these players just got a lot more interesting for me?
Hmm. All right. Uh, Coming into the draft, I only I well, first of all, I wasn't too high on the Clippers um overall, because their schedule ain't that great. Uh but I have one share of Paul George, for example, and I think a handful of John Wall shares. Um I was really banking on his, comeback season and whatnot, but specifically in the absence of Kawhi, I think the guy who is going to end up stepping up on most nights and most reliably is going to be Norm Powell.
Mm,
Powell
that,
will be
that's the name I
that.
was specifically going to ask you about, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I was just building up to the Norm Powell,
Of
you
course.
know, uh, landing, but it's Norm, and he's also had his fair share of ups and downs already. He's put up a dud, but overall, I think he's gonna average out as a decent um, player who can flirt with top 75 value, depending on whether or not his shot is falling, and his shooting efficiency fluctuations are under control. But Norm's a very interesting name as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, you're even a little bit higher on him than I am. I would say top 100 for me. But yeah, I agree with you. The skill set is certainly there. The opportunity seems to be there for him to make an impact both in reality and in the fantasy box scores and head-to-head matchups for a lot of those folks who may be needing some wing help. And I know last week we also talked about how the wing position has been is a little thinner this year than in other years that we've seen. So that's a good sort of opportunity. Of course, always injury. We hate to see it, but with injury comes opportunity, and that's kind of the name of the game on the waiver wire. It's not as I think in fantasy think of fantasy football. I don't want to say that it's easier. I hesitate to use that word, but it's different, right? It's player X gets hurt, therefore player Y who misses backup, and it's almost like you're picking up a very comparable replacement if it's a running back stepping in for another running back, right? Like for example, we're seeing that with Kenneth Walker and Rashad Penny in Seattle, right? Penny had some great games down the stretch last year, started off this year well, got hurt. Everybody's saying Walker, Walker, Walker. Finally, here he is, just balling out of control. In fantasy hoops, if Alex Caruso doesn't become a healthy Lonzo Ball. Let me put it like that. Alex Caruso has a good place. Ayo has his place, but they don't become that same player even in the same opportunity. So with fantasy hoops, you really have to be able to project it out. A lot of it's going to be based on injury, but a lot of it's also going to be based on opportunity. Those when those two things combine, you want to be on top of those situations in order to sort of bring it home. And in some cases, especially in really competitive landscapes like you referenced, Eric, you have to beat your competition to the punch. I know there have been times where I've been sort of my attention's been split across multiple leagues, and I spend the first minute picking up the same guy in the first three leagues, but that means I can't get him in the next two or three leagues because he's already gone, right? Somebody prioritized that league ahead of it. So something you have to be conscious of if you're sort of an addict like I am in this sense, or if you just got a lot of leagues to be mindful of, right? All right, Eric, let's get out of that discussion and let's move into a different discussion. We've talked in the past about Mr. McDaniels out in Minnesota, but I'm curious on your take about Mr. Jalen McDaniels down with the Charlotte Hornets, coming off his most recent game, a win against the Golden State Warriors, double double with a couple of threes, which at the big man position, that's not exactly a bad thing. He hasn't really lit it up defensively, but he's playing some steady minutes in the 20s to mid 20s. Saw his minutes creep up even more than that in the overtime win. And I'm curious if you think this is a player who can sort of sustain this level of production, and if you think he might have real value as we move forward into the season.
Well, right now, obviously, his usage is kind of bloated. The Hornets are missing guys like Rozier, Lamelo, even Cody Martin, for example, is somebody on the wings that the Hornets would have relied on, if he was just healthy enough to play. But that said, um, we're also missing Miles Bridges. I mean, bottom line. And as good as PJ Washington has started to look over the last couple of games, those minutes that McDaniels is bringing to the table is quality wing defense that they currently do not have. And for as long as the Hornets need that from someone, it's going to be McDaniels who's going to be delivering it, without Cody Martin, etc. So in the short term, I like him. I mean, I'm not gonna put a length of time, for how long he's gonna be useful, but I definitely would recommend him as a pickup in say 14 team leagues or deeper. I personally have added him in two leagues. Okay, a 12 team league, but it's 16 rosters deep. It's a weekly setup, but I added him. Um, They play 4 games, I believe, in week 3, and that's always a good thing. Um, and I like his stat set. He's somebody, similar to the other McDaniels, the better one that you just referenced, who's able to potentially deliver a 1-1-1 that we love in fantasy. So I know that the defense on Jalen's lines haven't been there consistently, but it's there. I mean, the guy can defend. It's just that he's not as engaged all the time. Maybe it also has something to do with the amount of minutes he plays, him
Mm.
coming off the bench and all that. But the guy's popped from time to time in the past, and as long as he's playing over 20 minutes per game, he's going to deliver you know some useful value, plus the fact that he rarely turns the ball over, so he's a darling in 9 cat especially, and that's what's part of his appeal.
Now, let me ask you about another player real quick before we get to. I know Dan was able to get a couple of questions from some of our listeners on Twitter earlier today. So before we go over there, I want to ask you about another player who kind of finds himself in a similar situation right now. Although he's had value throughout the year in this particular case, he's just been playing heavier minutes recently, again because of injuries, like you're describing in the case that is Charlotte, right? But this player, and I'm not going to give you a name yet, okay? This player over his last 4 games, he's seen 40, 36, 33, and 37 and a half minutes in these games. He's averaging 3.33s a game. He's averaging 16 and a half points per game. He's averaging 6 rebounds per game. He's averaging 1 assist per game during that stretch as well. And lastly, he's averaging 1 steal per game during that stretch as well. He has not missed a free throw during that stretch. Would you believe me if I told you that this player is not even rostered in 65% of Yahoo leagues right now?
Whoa, I'm pretty surprised. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's stunning.
Do you
How
have any idea who you think could this player be?
I'm embarrassed to say, I do not.
This is a tough.
Um,
This is a tough one. This is not somebody who would strike you as obvious. Now, this is a player who should, in my opinion, should have been drafted in almost all 12-team leagues, so long as they had some level of depth to them. This is a player the Pelicans clearly liked. I almost gave it away there, but here we go. This is a player the Pelicans clearly liked dating back to last year, and this player is still not known enough. And so I want to shine a special spotlight on Mr. Trey Murphy III, who has been phenomenal for New Orleans. Now, I know that Trey Murphy III is less exciting in name than the numbers I just read off to you, and maybe that's why he's only rostered in 63% of Yahoo leagues. To everybody's credit, I suppose, in the last day, that number is up 37%. So finally, we're starting to get a few eyes here. But even his teammate, Najee Marshall, who I think is more a product of circumstance right now than Murphy is, I mean, this Pelicans team is not only interesting, they're good.
yes, yes, they're definitely good. And Marshall, I think, was able to produce okay tonight, despite the return of Zion Williamson, who is in that Kawhi Leonard risk reward zone, but he's obviously playing a lot better, and his foot issue is no longer um, as big of a concern based on what he's been able to put up. But Najee Marshall is definitely somebody who has been picked up in a lot of my leagues. I play in a lot of 16 teamers, and because of that, I'm going to be starting a weekly article on Sports Ethos. So you guys watch out. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a deep league, catering to our readers and viewers who play in deep leagues like me. I'm going to be, talking about ads like Najee Marshall, who may not necessarily ping on 12-team radars, but is definitely a hot commodity when it comes to leagues as deep as I play in. So yeah, definitely. I was kind of disappointed, by the way, since we were just a quick hit because it hurt, and I'm in one of those tight matchups at the end of the week. Jose Alvarado let me down. He had a bad shooting night tonight, but um, he's ah There, what? It's my turn to ask you a question. Um, he hasn't been as great as I've hoped he has. Seen him mostly used as streaming material so far this season,
Yeah.
based on his inconsistent play. I have like a couple of shares. Should I hold or should I use that slot for streaming?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I definitely don't think you're the only one with that question, Eric. If it were me, I think I'd use that spot for streaming at this point. Um, it's. I think Alvarado can play in the league. That's not really my issue. There are players who have less skill than he does, who have been in the league for a longer amount of time. He's got a couple things working against him in terms of fantasy value. One is simply the depth in this team. I mean, really, they are incredibly deep with New Orleans. But the other thing for me is that, Alvarado basically came out of nowhere, right? There wasn't a really large opportunity for people to find out who he was until they found out who he was by playing against him. And then he became, a bullet point on the scouting report. Now he's got a couple lines to his name. And so that's the sort of next thing he's going to have to deal with is how does he, as an undersized player in particular, right? I mean, he's never going to be, even in a matchup, right, that he goes and finds in the park, he might not be the biggest player on the court. So that's always going to be the challenge for him is how does he compete when guys who are bigger and stronger than he is are his main matchup. Um, I would move on. I think that if you want to get what Alvarado brings to the table or the types of things he can bring to the table, I think you'll be able to find them on the waiver wire, whether that's through streaming or whether that's through a player who is a streamer and ultimately becomes more than that.
All right, thanks. That's some good advice. And yeah, I think I'm going to move on. I'm doing actually quite well this week. So far, I don't have a losing matchup out of my 8, yeah, Yahoo teams. So it's a good week. And that's despite, holding on to guys like Rozier, going through bad games of guys like Alvarado. So it's looking good. But I want to keep um, one thing I'd like to, it just popped into my head. A
Sure.
lot of leagues that I've joined this year have moved their playoff schedules earlier by 1 week, um, trying to avoid a lot of that silly season, in quotes, towards the end.
Absolutely.
And aside from just looking at the number of games during the playoffs, um, and it occurred to me quite late in terms of my preparation. I I started to think and I go, hey, it's not just about the playoffs now, about that change. It also means I'll have to hustle earlier and rack up those wins to pad my position in the standings to make sure I get into those playoffs. So in a league where I could have waited, maybe a week or two before, my team got going, I won't have as comfortable a luxury this season. So what that means, schedule wise, if you have some guys who, let's say, don't have a great schedule for the fantasy playoffs of your league, but they do have a strong early schedule, that's also something good. And that's also something that you can benefit from um, early in the season. Because if you can rack up wins early, you will have that buffer in case some of your main guys go down with this and that injury or health and safety protocols, or all of those headaches that we went through last season. So yeah, that's just a little bit of advice or a little nugget that came into my head that I'd like to share with our viewers.
I think that's a great point. Great point. No, for sure. And I think that's something to consider, right? I know there are some people who really pay close and careful attention to the details of the schedule when they're putting their teams together, both in terms of, weekly schedules and then ultimately how their league structured it toward the end with playoffs and fantasy championships. But I think anything you can do as a league to help ensure its integrity overall, right? Whether that's through the waiver wire trades and especially with schedules, it's only beneficial to the players involved. So I think that's a good call by you. All right, we're going to transition to the couple of questions that we got on Twitter from earlier today. So as a reminder, you can always pop questions in the chat, or you can also hit up Dan Besbris, who, if you do not know Dan, you are no way that you found this show. But you can hit him up with those same questions. You can hit Eric up with those questions. You can hit myself up with those questions. Both Eric and I have our names and Twitter handles down on the screen below. You see it right there. Eric's pointing right to it. Thank you, Eric. All right, Eric. So we're going to start with the first one. With this is from Dance with the Devil. Is that's not the username? That's the actual name that they use. So I feel like maybe it's Immortal Technique, the rapper. You never know. So here we go. All right. Which Sun center is the ad with DeAndre Ayton out? That would be nice commentary to hear. So this is one of those teams. Remember the one I was telling you about last week with Jokic as the first overall pick? Well, unfortunately, this is a team that also has DeAndre Ayton. It is also the team with Kawhi Leonard. We are banged up on that team already. And Jokic has gotten, sort of off to an uneven start himself. So with DeAndre Ayton on the shelf, I think a lot of people, are interested in defaulting back to Bismack Biyombo, who we saw last year with the Suns. But we also want to talk about Jock Landale because this Aussie can play.
All right. So what happened tonight? The game is there's a game. The Suns have a game. Their first win without Aiden, and they opted to start Biombo. So and he in 6 minutes already has two blocks. Yeah, he hasn't scored yet, but he has two rebounds and two blocks. In the 4 minutes, Landale has one rebound. To cut the story short, I'd say I'd trust Biombo more if you're after those blocks and boards. But Landale, the guy can hit threes. The guy has a shot that's beyond 5 feet from the rim. He is a more complete center, but Biombo is somebody who's, tried and tested. As you've said, he's proven himself last season. And he was able to pop as a quality streamer last season when Aiden also went down for a considerable amount of time. So I'd lean more on Biombo. In deeper leagues, I'd not ignore Landale altogether and consider, maybe streaming Landale if, Biombo was already picked up. But definitely the first choice, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be Biombo.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, and I'm curious to see how it shakes out tonight because here's a couple of things that I have in my thought process here. If you look at Bismack Biyombo's numbers from last season, okay, so we're going back to the 2021 campaign at this point. Going back last season, he started a handful of games. He averaged 12 points, 10 rebounds, and a block per game. Shot better than 50% from the field. He's an awful foul shooter, but he probably is not going to take enough to really hurt you there. But he is an awful free throw shooter. I do want to mention that. Landale's an interesting guy. I feel like there's always some level of novelty when there's a big white guy coming down the lane. I'm just going to say it how it is. So I think that sort of adds to his general appeal, but also to have an Australian player, to have international representation in the game of any type is wonderful for the sport and its fans. And I think Landale has just been sort of a surprise because nobody knew much about him. Here are my concerns, and this is why I'm curious about how the playing time is going to shake out ultimately in this game this evening. He's eclipsed 20 minutes once so far on the season. That was only when there was a blowout victory against the Golden State Warriors. Okay, and he did have a good game. I mean, he had 17 points, he had a couple blocks, 7 rebounds, very solid game. But otherwise, he's only reached double-digit rebounds on the year once. He's only got 4 blocks in one, two, three, four, five full games so far. He's got 0 steals on the season. He's got 2 3-pointers made on the season. You can be a good player in reality without having fantasy value. And right now, I feel like Landale falls more into that category for me. Unless some of those stocks start coming up, then I'm a lot more interested. But until then, if you need a big man, I would lean toward Biombo as well. So it sounds like Eric and I agree on that. Thank you for your input, Eric. Good question. Always around injuries. Of course, we'll always be happy to help. And then we're going to stick in the big man department. As a reminder to anybody watching, welcome in. I know we just got a few more. We appreciate you guys coming in. Please feel free to leave a question in the chat. We'll be happy to answer it for you guys live on air as well. All right. So the second question that we have here, Eric, is that are any of the backup centers, so like I said, we're going to stay big, any of the backup centers worth holding on to? And you were just talking about holding on to guys through injury. So I'll let you take this one first. Isaiah Jackson, Onyeka Okongwu, Richards, or Kessler. any of these guys, Nick Richards and Walker Kessler, any of these guys of interest to you personally? I have some. I'll go on my little spiel shortly, but I want to hear your take first.
Well, that's a definite yes, especially for Onyeka Okongwu. I don't know why his name was included. It's like I had Sesame Street flashbacks, and one of these things is not like the other. My goodness, he is
That is
okay.
why we pay Erik the big money to be here. I just want you guys to know that reaction right there. That's what I was looking for.
All right. First of all, yes, technically he is a backup center playing behind Clint Capella, but it's an actual timeshare, folks. At this point, they're splitting those minutes. Why? Because Onyeka Okongwu is that good. That despite Capella being a double threat with blocks on a nightly basis, Onyeka Okongwu is younger. Has better knees, a better Achilles, and is actually a center with a higher basketball IQ than Clint Capella. He is not somebody you consider just dropping or not holding on to. So yes, a definite yes for him, and he shouldn't even be um, in the question. But among those, who were they again? I'm sorry, I got Nick Richards, Isaiah. Oh yeah, Isaiah Jackson. Okay, even if he's not producing the numbers that you want him to produce right now, especially with Miles Turner back on and off back, but with Miles Turner back, the Isaiah Jackson value is not as good as you would have hoped, but it's still gonna be there. The guy established himself already last season. He's going to have a stable floor. Even if Miles Turner plays heavy minutes, you're going to have an off Isaiah Jackson game. But as you know, Miles Turner is not not the most durable of centers. He's almost guaranteed to miss time here and there. So many times the guy, uh, misses a game for this and that, whether it's a sprained ankle or a hamstring or whatever. Those legs somehow, are just wonky. And every time that Miles Turner, misses a game, Isaiah Jackson is just going to go off. All right. He was a double threat himself last season, while Miles Turner was out, and he provided blocks up the wazoo, aside from steals. Great, great field goal, decent free throw for a guy that, and it makes him viable in nine cat. All right. So he's also a definite yes, but not as strong as a Kongo as far as I'm concerned. Now, Richards and Kessler, whoa, they're probably gonna need injuries ahead of them in order to really pop. Let's say in standard leagues, but because I do play, like I said, in deeper leagues, they have some appeal. They're currently rostered in most of my 16 team leagues, for example. Um, Kessler, because of his upside in blocks, because he was like a block machine that just printed out blocks, uh, for the entire um, season in the NCAA last year. So I think Walker Kessler is somebody I'd hold. Uh, Nick Richards is, he also showed out, man. I just don't trust Mason Plumlee as much as the Hornet, as much as the Hornets, like Mason Plumlee. Nick Richards is really an up and coming big man. Now, if he's not performing up to snuff. Like for example, and I'm merging two questions from the night here. I swapped out my Nick Richards and I picked up Jalen McDaniels because I needed a forward to fill a forward slot for next week, and my center slots, it was a weekly roster changes thing, and I just decided to go with Jalen, for example. And so that's an example of dropping Nick Richards because I needed threes, I needed some blocks, so I think that was a need basis decision. So yeah, you probably could let go of guys like Richards. So in order of don't hold on to, it's Richards, Kessler, and Kessler. I'd hold on to Jackson and Okongwu. I'm gonna cut it there and hold on to the other two guys. So what are your thoughts, Ethan? I think you're muted, buddy. I can't hear you.
It would probably be helpful if I took myself off mute there, eh? All right. So I think like you, I think like you, Kongwu is one is not like the other. So I'm not even going to include him in this conversation. I think he's a hold no matter what right now. Um, Here's the thing with these sort of fringe big men, for lack of a better way to say it. We started the show by talking about James Wiseman, and almost everybody who drafted James Wiseman, myself included, right now, is holding on to him, hoping that something's going to change. And instead of getting frustrated by it, we're just saying, okay, this is, it's about to turn the next game, the next game, the next game. Why don't we view these guys the same way as right? So, like, I'm ready to move on from James Wiseman right now. And I in one league I could cut James Wiseman and I could pick up Nick Richards if I wanted to, right? Do I think Nick Richards is suddenly going to explode and become there's a great comment in the chat. That was a "What players are we muting?" take from Ethan, right? Yes, Matt. That was wonderful. I appreciate that. I need a good laugh today. Apologize for that, guys. So yeah, I don't think any of these other guys, Isaiah Jackson, as long as Miles Turner is healthy or on the Pacers, it's not going to be what I think it could be otherwise for him. Richards is interesting enough, but Charlotte is just it's a weird team to read right now because they have so many different things going on, so many guys still sidelined who can be prominent players for them, obviously. So until the dust settles there, I'm not going to take anything with rock hard cement out of that situation. Kessler and that whole team right now is just it's just such a weird group, right? I mean, the reality of Utah is that nobody saw this coming, and they're sort of playing above their head, and it's not involving Walker Kessler in the last few games or last couple of games, excuse me, DNP. So I don't see it for Walker Kessler. I think if I had to pick two, I think it would be Okongwu and it would be Richards, and that would be kind of where I drew the line on that one. Matt, if you want to talk about players we're muting, I mean, I don't know if you were with us earlier today, but Kawhi Leonard, we're muting him right now. I'm so frustrated with him. It's been not a picture perfect start to the season that I had been hopeful for him. So, we all have those draft regrets, and right now Kawhi is my number one. As we look toward the waiver wire, Eric, a lot of people are reactionary, right? They see what happened yesterday, and as a result of that, they make moves for tomorrow, right? I know it's something that we've talked about in the past, but I want to bring it up again. There's a reason that Yahoo's algorithm or ESPN's algorithm has the most added players at the top of sort of your transaction feed or your transaction window. It allows for an easy user interface for those people who aren't really deep in the weeds, right? Quick glance and say, okay, here we go. We got this player is available. I'm gonna pick them up. Stats accumulated yesterday don't help you tomorrow. They don't help you the week after that or the week after that. So you really want it to be an exercise and also projecting forward. Eric, do you see any players who have been picked up to start this season? I know it's sort of a weird question, but go with me on this. Have you seen any players be picked up toward the start of the season? And even if they're still currently producing well, you sit there and you say, you know what? I would try to, move on from this guy before it's too late. Obviously, these aren't going to be prominent, super prominent names like top 30 kind of players because we are talking about the waiver wire after all. And I don't think anyone's playing that far above their head. So I'm trying to find a tangible example to this to kind of give it some level of definition, right? Okay, so for instance, okay, like Royce O'Neal. I think people look at the minutes for Royce O'Neal and they go, wow, this guy's playing a lot. And, he looks like he's putting up some numbers, and I'm going to pick him up, right? I think that he has a place right now because he's hitting enough threes, I guess, but he's shooting like absolute junk from the field. I mean, in more games played, he shot sub 40% than he has above 50%. He's hitting a handful of threes. He kicks in a handful of points. He does enough defensively to keep him intriguing, but I don't know. Like, that's a good example of a player that I'm kind of talking about here. I feel like Royce O'Neal he's fine, but I don't think he's somebody who's going to save your season. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, I get your point. Um, I I get where you're going there. Uh, Royce is somebody, like you said, will not make or break somebody's some fantasy teams' season, but he has his place in the fantasy landscape, almost mirroring his value in real life, in the sense that he is a reliable 3 and D guy. He's, um, Trevor Ariza like, in the sense that his field goal sucks, as you said, but he is shooting threes, he is providing steals. And for as long as your fantasy team needs those things and Royce O'Neal provides those things, you're going to have an okay relationship with him on your roster. But I picked him up in a handful of leagues. But I have my eye on him on the bottom of my roster. So in case I really need to make a move, he's on that short list of names that I would consider moving for a critical pickup or whatever situation, or somebody I might have to throw in a trade, for example. Basically, I'm not attached to him. Is what I'm trying to say. So I'm not um, looking at him as a long-term piece for my team's future.
It's one of the many reasons, like this question of who is worth picking up and how much can I sort of extract from him, how much can I utilize him for the purpose of my fantasy basketball team. I think this is one of many reasons that I really prefer the the fab style budget of the waiver wire as compared to prioritized waiver rankings, because I don't think you should be penalized for being proactive on the waiver wire front. And in addition to that, I think everybody has an equal shot at the same player. And how much do you really want him? I think there's an element of that I like to it as well. But if I'm proactive and I try to grab somebody off the waiver wire and I get them, and that bumps me all the way back to the end of the line and it doesn't work out, that can really put me in a tough position for the rest of the season. So I'm a fan of action, right? Like in sports, we're always talking about ways in which we can enliven the sport. How can we make it a more actionable experience for our growing fan base? We're always now, screen oriented and look at this and look at this and look at that. There has to be multiple things going on. So I'm maybe it's just a personal preference for me, but hey, I guess that's why we all play in the leagues that we do, because we all have personal preferences accordingly. As we move forward, I also just wanted to shout out one player in particular. I know I said it last week. I'm going to say it again. I'd rather have Benedict Mathurin than Royce O'Neal on my team. He went on for 30 plus against Brooklyn. I really think this guy is going to be a
One of
player.
these things is not like the other, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
Apples and oranges, go on.
I know. I think he's really going to be a player, man, and I'm really excited about him. So I had to find a way to sneak him into the show. I wasn't sure how it was going to happen, and that's kind of how it happened. All right. I'm going to give it up now.
All right. So hey, just on Matherin, for example, since
Yeah.
you had to bring him up, right? So
I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, some commentary, he killed Chris Duarte in fantasy, right?
Yeah.
His usage just, he's a usage vortex, and the ball ain't landing in Chris Duarte's hands. And despite Duarte starting last game, he was able to produce 9 points in reasonable playing time. Duarte is not in it anymore, despite his hot start as a rookie. I've seen him dropped in multiple leagues this season. He's definitely not a hold. I don't know how many people are still holding on to Duarte, but if you are, as you just take a look at Benedict Mathurin, and that's the sign. That's the red flag that you have to move on, because Duarte is not gonna. There is too much overlap with the position that they play, and all of those minutes, those touches, that usage, it's all heading Matherin's way, because the rapport that he has with Halliburton, it's just crazy. It's through the roof. They've got that great 1-2 punch now. That Pacers team, and with all due respect for the great starter Buddy Hield, who probably might be a Laker before the next episode airs. I mean, there is a chance. There is a chance.
Oh,
But
I think there might be a good chance. I think you might be right.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking that just in case you have any doubts in your minds, drop Chris Duarte.
Right. So yeah, and to go back to the Lakers, I keep telling everybody I think Westbrook's going to be traded by the middle of November, and the middle of November is pretty much a week and a half away. So hold on to your hats because I think there's going to be some action in Lakerland. I will be surprised if they win tonight. By the way, again, another game against Denver. It is at home, so maybe that helps, and maybe there's a sense of desperation that they haven't been there, but I don't know. You could be as desperate as you want. It doesn't help you shoot the basketball. So we'll see. The game is just starting now. I haven't even had a chance to check it out because obviously we've been here with you guys. So we'll see how it shakes out for my Lakers this evening. But hopefully it's not an 0-6 start. That said, I look at the box score and it's the exact reverse of 0-6. It's 6-0 for the Nuggets. Troy Brown Jr. in the starting lineup for the Lakers alongside Anthony Davis. So we got a little bit of a different look for the Lakers. I don't know exactly what they're going to do in terms of long term. Russell Westbrook obviously coming off the bench, but that's enough for the Lakers. I'm over it. Let's get back to Matt. Matt made me laugh.
Before since we were on the show together, and you are effectively the resident Laker expert / fantasy guy as well, two hats and all. There's a player of interest to me as a deep league guy, and I can't help but keep my eye on him. And I was almost clicked on him as an ad for tonight, for example. I mean, that's Austin Reeves. I really liked, his game. I love. I followed the work he put in over the offseason, et cetera, et cetera. But for a team that's deep in his position, like the Lakers, and they still happen to be sucking. I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for him to get more minutes, for him to play more down the line? Because he is good. I mean, he's not super. I mean, he is arguably the best role player on that team. The guy who's not after becoming a superstar, but he's just there to win games.
Yeah.
And a guy with that mindset on that roster, he's the best, on your Laker team. So is there hope for Austin Reeves somewhere down the line this season? I know he blew up towards the end, in silly season in 20. That game I'm talking about, and that crazy ass triple double. So we know he has that in him.
At Denver too, which is a tough place to play. At Denver with the rarefied air.
Exactly.
So I mean, I think you make some great points. Look, I like to say I like that you said the Lakers are deep, because in my opinion, Lakers are too tall at the small positions, too small tall positions, and too shallow to have depth anywhere across their roster construction. But yes, I think there's a lot of potential people that could fill those minutes is a more accurate way to say that. Look, it really depends on a couple of things with Reeves. It depends on if his minutes are going to be closer to 19 or 20, or if they're going to be closer to 25 to 28. I know people are like, oh, it's only 5 or 7 minutes. What's the big deal? It can make a really big difference, especially when you're playing with certain personnel out there, the groupings, right? Because if he's on the court with Anthony Davis and or LeBron James more often, he's going to find himself in better positions more often to be successful. And as the Lakers struggle shooting in particular, and Reeves is not a bad defender by any means, okay? He competes his ass off in particular. But in terms of the shooting, I mean, that's really what asset he can bring to the team. And as long as the Lakers are going to struggle with their shooting, which appears to be like it's going to be a season-long struggle when it comes to their shooting, Reeves is going to have minutes. Now, if they make a trade that brings them a player like, Buddy Hield, or even my dark horse destination is shipping Russell Westbrook to San Antonio to go spend some time with Greg Popovich in a salary dump, and Josh Richardson comes back to the Lakers, because Josh Richardson can literally play 48 minutes for this Lakers team. I mean, that's how bad they need a player like that on this club, okay? Short of something dramatic to shake up the roster construction, Reeves has a path to minutes. And most recently, prior to this game tonight against Denver, you look at the game against Minnesota, you look at the previous game against Denver, he had a couple of threes in each one. He's averaging 10 points, 4.5 rebounds, a couple assists. You really would like him to do something defensively right? Because a couple of threes per night is nice, but if you're going to be that 3 point specialist, you really want to see 3 plus threes, closer to 4 or 5 even in terms of the average than just a couple in today's NBA. Back in the day, 2 threes a night is a big deal. Now it's like, okay, and what else, you know? So with the overall picture for Reeves, I think if he can establish himself as a 25 to 28 minute guy, barring any significant roster construction, yeah, there's a potential path there. Is he a must-add player by any means? Absolutely not. But also in a 16 team league, the waiver wire looks a lot different than it does in a 10 or a 12 team league, like a lot of our listeners and a lot of us are in. So, I think in a 16 team league, he definitely merits strong consideration. In a 12 or even 14 team format, I'm not sure that he's there yet. Maybe a 14 team, depending on the depth of the league.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
That was very useful, and I'm glad you brought up Josh Richardson
Yeah.
in your little in your um as a waiver wire show. We would be remiss if we did not mention old Josh. I know he's injured right now, but when Devin Vassell, you know, got injured, it was Josh Richardson who stepped into the starting lineup and even dropped a double double with like 10 assists or something like that. He's shooting close to 50% from the field, providing threes and some steals. He's a solid under the
Yeah.
radar guy, and he is somebody worth streaming in 12 teamers definitely, but he's actually a hold despite his injury in deeper formats that I play in. So I'm liking his situation over there in San Antonio. And Richardson is somebody definitely should be on people's lists.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. In fact, I have him on a couple of rosters already. I have for a little while now. So I've always liked Josh Richardson. I think he's the kind of player who I find myself sort of looking at and going, man, this is a really talented player. Just general talent evaluation. I like those types of guys. So we'll continue to watch the trajectory of Josh Richardson, and if he found himself with with a team like the Lakers, wow, that would really be exciting for his for a lot of reasons. The scope of what he might bring would change, but I think his fantasy value would really be in a good spot as well. All right. So, Matt, we appreciate you sticking with us. We'll get to your question. We'll kind of sort of use this to help usher in the conclusion of our show this evening as well. All right. Matt wants to know that Kelly O has been loud. Kelly Olynyk, of course. Yes, he has. Kawhi has been muted, and I'm a Clips guy, so take this as it is. Yes, unfortunately, look, my best friend is also a big time Clippers fan, and he's as frustrated as you, I'm sure. So, should I ask a Kelly manager to turn the volume to 11 and see if Kawhi manager bangs on my wall to swap? Wow. This is such, I mean, it's so weird to even be asking this question right now. But
Okay, would you take? Let's just dump it on your lap, man. Would you take Kelly Olynyk right now in his current production for your absentee Kawhi Leonard?
I mean, I think, it's such an insane question because this is a player who's comfortably ranked outside the top 125, probably even the top 150 to start the year, and has been a top, 60, 70, 75 player, basically. Although it's been inconsistent in terms of across the season, his production levels, because he kind of, fluctuates back and forth. Olynyk has been, very, very useful. I don't know. I have no idea how to project Kelly Olynyk forward. I have no idea how to project the Utah Jazz forward, but it's not like the Jazz are in a position where they're going to acquire some massive amount of talent at the deadline or any time in between. I mean, this is a team that wants to be bad, so they don't want to be good. They're not trying to be good right now. They are trying to rebuild, and instead they've got this group of sort of cast off toys that are instead saying, no, actually we're here to play. That all said, I don't think I'm that desperate, Erik.
All right, I agree. I think it's too early in the season. I mean, for guys to panic. Oh, I mean, it's too early in the season to panic if you own Kawhi Leonard. If your team is in trouble, we're like 6 weeks in. Oh, fine, that's a bit too much. We're 4 weeks in, 5 weeks
Yeah.
in. Kawhi still hasn't shown up to the office. Then you start to worry. Um, and that time, I'd consider the Kelly Olynyk play. Um, my point being to Matt here is that you might be buying on Kawhi. Yeah, I mean, fine. If you want Kawhi, you're interested, offering up Kelly Olynyk is not a bad play. I think at some point, um, depending on how strict Adam Silver is going to be with all of this tanking brouhaha, um, if I were the Jazz, I'd sit guys like Olenek and Markkanen because they're playing too well, to be honest. Um, but and that's the risk that you have on your hands with an Olenek, um, because he is on a tanking team or a team that would like to preferably tank if it were just entirely up to them. So yeah, it's a bit early also to acquire Kawhi. I'd like to see him play a bit more. But of course, you're running the risk. I guess we're playing chicken versus with Kawhi Leonard's first great game, right? I think that's the game we're playing here. And is that great game going to be better than what Olenek has been doing on and off for the first 2 weeks of the season? Obviously, it might be, it likely will be, because Kawhi is Kawhi and Olenek, has a ceiling. Um, I mean, yeah. If okay, I don't know. It's hard again. Like Ethan was saying, it's hard to answer that question in a vacuum. I don't know the situation of your team. Can you afford to babysit Kawhi? Are you a winning team right now? Are you at the top of your standings? If Kawhi misses, more games over the next 2 to 3 weeks, can you carry that until mid December, for example? Um, is that something your team can deal with? And if so, hey, it's as if you drafted Kawhi much later than Ethan obviously did. So why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Matt's case, he's as the Kelly owner. I mean, right? Like, sure. I mean, I would throw it out there. All right. There's a player who you either drafted in the last round or picked up off the waiver wire. So your investment is nothing, literally. And if you could turn it into a player who's being drafted in the top 25 to 35, 40 players, sure, even with the injury concern, both short term and long term for Kawhi. But as the Kawhi side of that deal, I don't think I'm ready to go there quite yet. Oh, thanks, Matt. We appreciate your words, man. And yeah, Kelly Olynyk could be on the Lakers in a matter of weeks. I mean, shoot, anybody on the Lakers in a matter of days and or weeks. I mean, I'm so eager to watch the Lakers, who are already down by 10 points at one point in this first quarter. So I'm so eager to watch them. It is an exercise in masochism at this point. But I'm also a Mets fan, as you guys can tell by my hat tonight. So I guess I'm an expert in the field when it comes to that stuff. All right, we're just about done for this evening as the clock hits 7 o'clock. Erik, are you on vacation next week, buddy?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to run this ship solo, but
Oh
I'll just
boy.
be gone for 1 week. Unlike your Kawhi Leonard, I'm just gonna miss one game. But I'll be back right away. Just consider it one end of a back to back. I'll be back.
All right.
But I'm gonna be missing you, buddy. And this was a wonderful episode again. Thank you for your questions, everyone. And last one for Matt, since you were our last question asker. Counterpoint: instead of chasing Kawhi, offer someone less and chase Norm Powell. Yeah. And since you're such a Clippers guy, you'll get your Clipper fix, but you'll get somebody more reliable in the early, short term. And that's my counterpoint suggestion to you, Matt.
Yeah, I like
So
it.
yeah,
And we're gonna end on that note. Erik's gonna be having a great time in Thailand. I'll be back here with you guys. Bull fever has hit the NBA, ladies and gentlemen. 14-10 with 3 blocks tonight, looking like a potential league winner if you drafted him at the end of your draft or scooped him up off the waiver wire as well. So we'll leave you on the note that is Bull. And until next time, we out.